Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Conversations Cafe, What Gives You Hope, number 3. This episode is the third and final installment for our What Gives You Hope series, talking about coping and resiliency in the social distancing era. And we have a great group of guests visiting us today who are going to be sharing a little bit about their organizations. We have a great DIY project that you can take advantage of during our current realities. And we have some guests talking about their creative endeavors and how they find a connection with themselves through our current isolation experiences. One of the things that we always want to do with Conversations Cafe is create an opportunity to not just talk about the technical data around mental health and living with mental health challenges and confronting them, but really getting to hear individual stories and share experiences that come across a lot of different intersections. We're never ever going to be able to get the whole mental health conversation done in one episode. We're always taking small little bites. And so that continues tonight. One of the things that we really want to focus on as we go through this episode is we're all sharing in this collective experience that can be somewhat of a psychological injury, somewhat traumatic. For a lot of people, they might be having a certain level of discomfort with the way things currently are, a lot of unease and a sense of lack of control. And that can be true in any era and any time period in life. But right now, we're probably all sort of united in feeling that to a different extent. So one of the big messages that we want to be presenting tonight for those who are watching and listening, and whether you engage tonight or in the days to come, is this idea about creating different tools for us to not just cope and get through the day to day, but find ways to sort of be resilient, find ways to sort of thrive and get ourselves into a healthy, productive spot. And productive doesn't mean how many workouts you do in a day or how many creative projects you do or how much actual labor work from home stuff you do. Productive is just sort of finding the tools necessary to give yourself an even balance and feel comfortable in this entirely and incredibly uncomfortable time. So we're going to be talking to a lot of great people who have different insights from their professional backgrounds on a number of different topics. And let's just jump right into it with our first guest, who is representing from the YWCA, a great individual named Kelin Hall, who we're going to be having on. First, we want to make sure they can be heard and seen before I make a formal introduction. Kelin, can we hear you and can we see you?
Hello, can you hear me and can you see me?
Yes, we can. Great. Thank you so much for joining us, Kelin. Um, so why don't you introduce yourself real quick for our audience?
Sure. I'm a bilingual therapist at the YWCA, and at the YWCA, we offer sexual assault counseling for folks of all ages, as well as their family members or partners or friends who have also been impacted by the sexual assault or abuse. And all of those services are completely free of charge. We also have a general counseling service that folks can use their insurance to access. And we also just started offering sliding scale counseling for folks for $30 or $40 a session, depending on the experience level of the therapist. So that's what we're doing right now.
And that's so critical. YWCA is an organization that's been around for quite some time. I believe more than 100 plus years, right?
180 plus years. Yeah.
And in the current realities, there's probably been a few adjustments because YWCA has resources, direct services. They also provide things like haven, sort of safe haven opportunities, right? So to the best of your ability, what have been some of the adjustments that YWCA had to make, to meet the current realities?
Yeah, so the YWCA does a lot of different programming. We teach young people about technology. We help small business owners to start up their businesses. We help people apply for benefits. So, and we have a bunch of different locations across the Chicagoland area. So there have been tons of different adjustments, and I don't even know all of what's going on. But in terms of counseling, we have shifted to everyone is working from home. And we, as sexual assault counselors, we have some different privacy considerations. We actually have a higher level of privacy protection than mental health counselors. And so we're not yet allowed to offer video counseling. So I've been spending many hours on the phone every day. And it's required getting really creative, like asking my clients, tell me where you are, tell me what's going on in the room. What's your favorite object in the room? Tell me all the memories that come up with it. What's bugging you about your surroundings? So it's really required like a lot of creativity on our part to figure out how to stay engaged and connected with folks when we can't be in the same room with them.
And thank you for sharing that, because one of the reasons why we were excited to have you come on as a guest is that right now it can be very easy for people to think that if they need the heightened level of supports at a clinical level, they might feel like, well, there are no options available to me, or everyone's shut down and went home, so I have no hope. I don't know if there's any options. So it's just really important for people to hear that you at your clinical level are still able to make bridges and inroads and adaptations to confront and support individuals.
Yeah, and I would also add that I'm on a number of Facebook pages with lots of different therapists, and like therapists are open for business, right? Like they are working from their homes, and some of them are eager to start with new clients because other clients don't want to work on the phone. I personally, during this period, I'm going to be starting with 6 new clients. Some I've seen 3 times, some I've seen 1 time. And yeah, it is different not to be in the same space, but it's also not impossible. And I've already had lots of just like great moments of like, oh yeah, we're connecting, or oh, I said something that was useful to this person, or I heard a lot of relief when I was able to listen to this person and validate them. So I think that even though right now is like a strange time to begin therapy, it can be a great time to begin therapy.
And that's really exciting to hear, because the fact is we can't necessarily change the realities around us, but
Yeah.
and it can be really hard to try and positively engage in things, especially when we don't have control. But trying to look at, can we turn negatives into positives? I think that that's a very powerful tool. It might even be, and this is, I can't speak for everyone, but I, anecdotally speaking, I can even imagine it might be even more accessible for someone to engage in a clinical support over the phone than looking someone face to face. Whether it's just the physical proximity thing might make them feel uncomfortable, or even an accessibility thing. There might be someone who may have thought that they weren't able to connect with resources because it required getting on public transportation and going to X, Y, and Z, or anything along those lines. And if it can be reduced, or the barriers can be reduced to picking up the phone, and if they have the resources for maybe video, if that's an option or whatever, but that might actually open up somebody to trying to connect in a way that they never wanted to consider before. Um,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go on.
Oh, that's totally true. And I've had folks tell me things that, I've been working with them for quite some time and have never come out before. And sometimes the intimacy of being in person can even make it harder to share things. So it's been really interesting to see what's been showing up, what's been harder, but also like new kind of openings and connections that have been made during this period. I think also maybe for some folks starting therapy right now and focusing on, okay, like my whole world just got turned upside down. Can I ask for some help to adjust to this new reality, this right now? It could be an easier thing to engage in when, it's like everybody is struggling to adjust to the new reality versus like, I'm going to go to therapy and work on my deepest issues, right? and I think for some people it could be like a step in to being like, oh yeah, it's like, it's okay and it's useful to ask for help to get through this hard time.
Oh, and that's such a great insight, because I think um, hearing you say that, I think that it makes me, when we're getting feedback and context here at Hope for the Day, there's probably a lot of individuals who always thought of mental health as, well, it's a clinical diagnosis, and mental health means you have bipolar disorder or clinical depression, and if it's not that, then mental health doesn't really have anything to do with myself.
Mhm.
And what you're bringing up, where people are looking at this might be a first opportunity. I think we've seen individuals voice that they never thought mental health was them.
Mhm.
When it comes to psychological injuries, things that can be traumatic, this sudden change in lifestyle can also create like a sense of grieving, change, loss, job insecurity, all the things that are part of that drop down menu. And that is just point as a fact is a part of the mental health conversation.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like, from what you're saying, this might, another way this isn't about painting false silver linings, but this might be an opportunity for people to engage their mental health who maybe, because of their lifestyle, work, or maybe just beliefs they've always held, they never thought it was relevant. And maybe an unfortunate but fortunate reality of this situation is that maybe this helps generate a realization that, no, you too, mental health does impact you as well, and you need to start a conversation for yourself. I love hearing that, the way you bring that up. um,
Thanks.
can I ask, uh, from your perspective, obviously, we can't speak for everyone in the whole field of whatnot, but as you've been going along and doing this sort of adjustment with therapy, have you sort of noticed what have been impactful coping tools, or thoughts, or tips, tricks, or suggestions that have been supportive to other people?
Yeah, I think the first important thing is to acknowledge that this is hard. I think that some folks, if they're not directly impacted, if they're not like experiencing a loss in the family or job loss, they're like, well, I have everything I need, so I should be fine, right? But recognizing that the loss of your daily connection, your daily routine, the things that bring like fun and meaning and joy to your life, like that is real loss, right? And dealing with the collective trauma or collective feel, or even that you have to be making all these kind of like moral decisions all the time. Like, am I going to do something that's good for me and my mental health, like see a friend, or like go for a walk, or like for the good of everybody and like public health, do I stay inside, right? Like all of that really has a toll. So I think first, just like acknowledging and like allowing yourself to feel what you're feeling, rather than being like, oh no, I need to be okay, I need to be productive, and then beating yourself up for being like, no, but I'm tired all the time and I'm unmotivated, right? So just giving yourself permission to have those feelings is the first tip, I would say. Um, and then I found it really useful to explain to folks that when we feel like we're under threat, our body and our nervous system can go into this fight, flight, freeze mode. So maybe you've noticed that folks are a little more irritable, they're snapping at each other, right? Or maybe some people are feeling the urge to go running for the first time in 5 years, or you're avoiding all the news, you're avoiding connection, right? That's the flight. You're like, how do I get out of this situation? Or freeze is you shut down, you turn off, right? And that's your body's way of like, this all evolved evolutionarily when our threats were like predators, right? If you play dead, you might not get killed. It also insulates you from pain. But when we shut down in our lives, we're not able to engage, we don't feel motivated. Or when we're in fight or flight, but we're not um, actually being able to run away or fight something off, then we're just totally keyed up. So when you're able to kind of like look at, okay, what's going on in my body? What's going on in my nervous system? What do I need? You can make more informed choices about your self-care. So like if you're all hyped up, maybe you need to exercise and discharge some of that energy, or just like move your body, right? Or maybe you need to take a deep breath. and like shift out of that higher register, right? Or if you're really shut down, maybe you need to start with like, okay, like what is like one thing that makes me feel, right? Is there a friend that can make me laugh? Is there food that I like to eat, right? So when you know a little bit about your nervous system, you can be like, all right, what do I need and how do I like shift back into my equilibrium? So those are kind of like some of the top things. I think there's a million lists of things like your routine, eating healthy, like social connection, right? But yeah, I could talk more about social connection, but we could also move on.
No, I think, that's a really good point. You brought up what is actually a very direct tool for people. We always like being able to deliver things to our listeners and viewers that it's something substantive, right? It's one thing to say like, oh, go out and run or go out and do this or da da da, but here's something that, if you're listening or watching right now or in later days, weeks, and months, self create a self-assessment. That flight, fight, freeze mode, you can assess and see how you're feeling. When hopefully it talks about thinking of your mind like a bottle of soda that can build up with pressure, and we say like there's a genetic thing that can shake the bottle up and build up pressure. Well, we're all experiencing an external thing, uh, this isolation and the realities around it. But you can sort of chart your days. How has it been for you? Get in touch with your emotions, and replay what Kaylin's just been talking about. Have you been sort of frozen up? Do you find yourself really wound up? Do you find yourself disconnected? Um, I think those are super, super usable tools because you're not asking somebody to like, well, do you think your serotonin is higher or lower right now? Do you think it's this? But just being able to assess, and I would want to add one thing into that because I think you touched on it, and there's all sorts of cynicisms with social media and technology, and well, a flip side is we've certainly found, especially maybe older generations, have found that hey, this technology and social media is not so silly; it's useful. Um, but one of the cynicisms we've always had about social media was, people show their Instagram lifestyle, and that's not necessarily reality. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to put an asterisk on what you're saying, to also double down on, because we're in isolation. Obviously, social media becomes one of the only tools we have. But that rule of we're not necessarily seeing like the true reality of someone's experience, even though they've now framed it aesthetically as they're in isolation. There's such a thing, or I'm just going to invent this term, or maybe not. Maybe somebody else has written about it or whatever. But I want people to be mindful of like the illusion of productivity. So, there's you see a lot of video about people doing 30-day challenges, and I worked out super hard, and like I wrote my novel, and I've painted 1,000 things and drawn 1,000 things and made songs and learned how to bake a master course. And for other people, because of exactly what you're talking about, they have been impacted, experience a psychological injury. You can be seeing that stuff and just being like, well, hell, I just feel worthless and useless, and I need to get my butt in gear. And look, being physically active might be an essential core part of someone's identity in staying mentally balanced. That's reality. But if that was not something you were innate to, that doesn't have to be your level of physical activity. You don't have to be a CrossFit expert. You hit it right on the head. We said, just do physical activity, move your arms, have a sitting dance. That can be activity. So we want people to be mindful that you can also find a toxic experience just from like a productivity sort of illusion where you see people who are trying to show a high functionality that may not be your rhythm, and thinking you have to match up to that can be just as detrimental as inactivity, of not doing anything. And I just think, I'm sorry, go on.
Yeah, I just think the key is like not to hold yourself to some like rigid external standard, but to be checking in and like, so say you have some time to take care of yourself, or say you're really kind of agitated and upset. So you try a thing, like, is the thing taking a nap, or is the thing doing jumping jacks or putting on a song you like and moving around? And then you check in with yourself after and be like, okay, do I feel more tired or do I feel more hopeful and energized, right? And shift, because it's like we don't have most of the like building blocks that keep our routines in order. And we got to create some like new routines. And it's really helpful to be intentional about it and evaluating like, is this working for me? Because like CrossFit ain't working for me, right? Like dancing in my kitchen working for me, right? So it's just everybody's different.
Well, and that's so important to hear. And I cannot thank you enough for bringing that to light. And I would invite you to stay with us as we wind down this part and bring on our next guest. Uh, Kelin, again from the YWCA. Please stick around all the way through the end if you've got the time. Thank you so much. And we're going to be moving on to our next guest, who is a creative spirit and also a team member at Hope for the Day's Sip of Hope Coffee Bar in Logan Square. And Sip of Hope has currently been, for health concerns, we decided to close the shop outright, to protect our staff, protect our customers. And that may not be a permanent decision. Those are powers beyond my decision making. But we have a wonderful creative spirit and team member from Sip of Hope, Cristi Lopez. So let's make sure we can hear Cristi and see Cristi before I go any further. So let's start that video. And Cristi, can we hear you?
Oh, okay.
We see you.
It's me.
Hello, Cristi. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's such a pleasure to see you.
Yeah, of course.
So Cristi, why don't you just sort of introduce yourself, obviously Sip of Hope team member, but also talk about sort of your phenomenal creative endeavors.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm a barista at Sip of Hope. I've been working there just over 6 months now. And I'm a professional painter and illustrator as well. And my work actually revolves around themes of mental health awareness. So working at Sip of Hope is a really nice complement to the work that I make on my own. So I guess that's the most brief introduction I can give.
And we certainly don't need to be too brief. I would like to know, as we're kicking off here, Cristi, what has been how have you been adjusting to things?
So on the heels of what you were talking about with social media and kind of advertising your progress throughout quarantine, I think that for me as an individual, this has been mostly a challenge in seeing where I derive my sense of self-worth, because I am for the moment out of a job, and most creative projects like murals and just gallery shows around the city, they've all been canceled. I really haven't been able to engage in the things that usually, keep me moving throughout the day and keep me creatively inspired. So I've had the opportunity to look at what I can do every day and kind of see where I was being motivated more by guilt and shame and a feeling of obligation to be productive instead of an actual joy for what I was doing. So because I have actually kind of a blessing of like all of this time to myself, I've been able to break down a lot of those really harmful habits that I've built that aren't sustainable. And now I can kind of reevaluate them.
A little clap there. I got to tell you, I think that hearing that's such a wonderful insight. It's interesting, Cristi, that you bring that up. It's almost like you're saying that in this experience, this has become like a distillation process where you're sort of refining to your core essentials. Like you're stripping away some of the things. Can you talk a little bit, if you can, the part on things you felt like you were compelled to do as opposed to they were more organic? I want to talk about the organic part, but the things you're compelled to do, what is that sort of for you? What does that really drive into that a little bit?
Okay, so I guess speaking to my career as an artist, I think that most every artist gets into that because of a joy of creating, and an actual like deriving a lot of pleasure from the artistic practice. I think that as I've gotten older, and now I'm in my late 20s, I feel that with every passing day, there's more and more pressure to make the things you love lucrative and to make them, you know, a career and to make them prestigious and to have a lot of accomplishments. And I think that, again, that pressure to be productive and that pressure to basically make everything you love into something that's, how do I say, like something that's like a job, like kind of just to treat everything like a job. It's a total understandable pressure, especially in our society that derives most of like an individual's worth based on, you know, how much money they make and, you know, where they kind of fall in society. So I feel like this experience, I haven't actually lost everything, but it's almost like I get to pretend that I have for a short period of time and kind of see what it's like when I don't have, you know, the constant external validation and the constant like I'm just like constantly going, I'm part of the machine. Like I'm not a part of the machine right now and I don't really have a way to be, but I still have to find a way to me, like as an individual, move forward, if that makes sense.
That does. And I think that it's really interesting, you know, using the words and phrasings of productivity. You know, this is a mental health forum and topic, but I find it really interesting, you know, connecting from, you know, Kelin, into your words and your experience. Productivity kind of has this like socioeconomic factor to it. Like, you know, how are we producing and our validation through the producing? And it sounds like, I don't know, I certainly don't want to put words in your mouth. It sounds like this is an opportunity where what you will choose to produce, if at all, becomes something that's really connecting more to your heart and more to, you know, the core of your identity, as opposed to matching up with. And I'll just jump ahead and say that I think there's obviously something that can be very potentially toxic about, and I'm sure it's ingrained in our society, of like measuring ourselves in the consumer, you know, productivity level. But really like to know about, so if you've been able to start to distill and identify key values, what have those been for you? What sort of like jumped to the fore or become something you've found substance in?
Well, I think at least for me, I can't help but I guess answer that from the perspective of someone who is recovering from like a mental health disorder. So a year and a half ago, I was diagnosed with OCD. So for the past year and a half, I've been very active in my recovery. And I actually feel like during this time, where I've shifted most of my energy is actually in seeing how, like with no other distractions, how I can basically, like, I don't want to get too into like the content of the OCD, but I think anyone who deals with a mental health disorder, a lot of the distractions of daily life can serve as excuses not to really confront, I would say, like the more difficult aspects of your disorder. Like you can keep moving along, you eventually like degrade, but you can kind of at least pretend to move along. So I think that initially when the isolation happened and I was home alone, I live alone in a studio apartment, I really had nothing to distract myself from the disorder that I live with. Like I didn't really have any place where I could go to divert my attention, especially in the early days when we really didn't know what was happening. And even leaving our house was like, I don't really know if that's okay. And now we understand more. So, you know, we know like 6 feet and the masks and everything. But at first, I think I was overwhelmed with this feeling of like, oh, I really have to face this now. And I really have to become comfortable with the fact that like I have to live with this. And now I actually really have to look at it in the face and deal with it every day. And initially, I think I actually made that mission of like recovery, I made it into another like productivity thing. And I designed a boot camp, and I was like, I need to recover the right way, and I need to like be super proactive. And I designed this whole thing, and I crashed and burned in like 5 days. So yeah, I think there's something to be said about also not treating recovery and relaxation like another, just kind of diverting that pressure to be productive into something that actually should be healing. Yeah. So.
That's beautiful, because something in Hope of the Day that we're always trying to express is this, and you've certainly seen in our education pieces, Cristi, that the dignity of the individual. And a lot of that, what you're talking about, kind of comes to a circle, connects with that, in that people hear the word dignity of the individual and they don't know necessarily what that means, but we're trying to say, like, unchain yourself from the comparing and relating and matching up your experiences with others. And we're often talking about being able to navigate, if you have a mental health challenge, stigma, if it's like the biggest obstacle for getting support and services. One of the biggest things stigma will do is make you have to validate your experiences externally, as just trusting in your inner self that if it's causing you a problem in life, you need to support, and just because it doesn't look like somebody else's thing. And it sounds like that's kind of, and I love that you feel comfortable enough to talk about, like, hey, I tried something and it was a crash and burn. That connects so much. What you were describing in your first days in the isolation experience connects so much with what Kelin was just talking about with the sort of the fight or flight responses, and you finding your way. So there's a great synergy there. And I think before we go to our next guest, Cristi, we wanted to sort of also touch on, if you've been so great to share with us sort of some of your learned, adjustments and everything. We did want to talk about your art though also. Full disclosure, we try to, when we were doing this as a live recorded podcast, we were doing it once a month at Sip of Hope. And we had connected and wanted to confirm Cristi as a guest months ago, just as you would do. And we've had to make adjustments here, but we thought that this would be a timely, in April, place to talk about your work. And remembering, everyone who's watching right now, remembering that this isn't about, oh, well, you need to go out and do your own art productions. Okay. You have always innately connected your creative endeavors to a very much direct intersection with mental health. And I just wanted, if you would feel comfortable sort of talking about those experiences, just, sort of where the inspiration was, because we were hoping to showcase some of the work and things like that.
Yeah, do you want me to talk about my work during this isolation period specifically, or more generally?
Take it like a Sunday, do both.
Okay. So yeah, I want to start off by saying that pretty much the only thing I've drawn during isolation are plants, because I really can't bring myself to create this like allegorical work that you guys see here. That's a way more intensely personal and more symbolic. So as an artist, as a professional artist, I have been having a very difficult time making the things that I usually make. And I hope that sharing that will take pressure off of other professional creatives. Beyond that, the work that I make usually is, it's all inspired by my journey. I've been making work about my mental health journey before I had a name for it. Before I had this diagnosis that kind of puts me in a category where I feel like, I know what therapy I need, and it is useful to have a category, but there was a sort of magic to making all this work before I knew my situation. And then in retrospect, looking back and seeing that I've been making work about my mental health journey all along. And a lot of the motifs that come up are directly related with some of my OCD obsessions and compulsions. But I guess the challenge as I make work now in the future is that because I have this awareness, because of, innocence lost, there's the challenge is now that I don't want the work to be contrived, because it's always come from a place of, not knowing and pain and struggle. And now that I kind of know where that pain comes from, I think that my work is inevitably going to take a new direction that is more explorative, kind of where I am at this phase in my life. So yeah, all my work is very personal and pertaining to whatever, mental health struggles and triumphs I'm experiencing at the time.
And we love that we obviously put a little snapshot on there, and I actually it's funny, I don't know if we're gonna get a for whatever
because of the boobs. Oops.
So, I've been watching enough Twitch live feeds that I've seen people get shadow banned for stuff, so we'll find out real quick if we got dinged or not. But here's one of the reasons that we wanted to share your work months ago and why it was important to talk about it now. And we will be putting links up to where people can check out your portfolio. Is, and especially hearing your ongoing process and this evolution. People's creative endeavors in art is going to look different for everyone, whatever someone's mediums are, their approach, all those things. But one of the things that we really wanted to celebrate and have you on, and hear from your own words is the fact that when we talk about mental health, okay, limping and sneezing and a fever, these are all signs and symptoms of physical unwellness. We've been educated as a community how to recognize these signs, how to communicate these signs, and what to do at some level, how to respond to those things. But when it comes to our mental health, our signs and symptoms of our unwellness, are through self-expression. And stigma controls a lot of that. We can recognize that crying is a form of unwellness, but crying can be joy, right? But we know that stigma can say, well, boys don't cry. Anger and aggression can be a sign of unwellness. But stigma could say, well, women aren't supposed to showcase, because of your gender and identity. And it continues to go down ethnic, economic, geographic, all sorts of different nuances. And when we talk about stigma beyond a buzzword, the quickest way to understand it is just, it's the things that we don't say. And what makes any individual not want to be able to talk about their mental health can look a lot of different ways. And self-expression is talking, but when we talk about dancing, singing, and arts and things and creative spirits, this is also a way of communicating our mental health. A timestamp, a moment in time, if you will, maybe a reality, maybe the evolutions of what we learned. And it's just so important for us to have individuals who do intentionally want to connect that creative endeavor with the realities around, be it their mental health or a more general one, because this helps inspire others to recognize that they too can find an outlet to make those communication points. That when we talk about it's okay not to be okay, that's both about trying to break stigma, but we also recognize that not everyone's going to be able to communicate by saying, hey, I am not all right. But producing a picture, producing a song, producing a dance, producing a way is a thing that's is a way of sort of really locking that in. And so we just thought it was so important, and we were really taken away, and I'll speak personally, it was really taken away with the way your productions have come out and sort of showcase those things. And I think it's also important for our guests and people who are viewing this to understand that for folks who don't have a clinical diagnosis of something, they're living in we're all part of a shared trauma. But for people who are living with a clinical diagnosis, managing your mental health was already, a difficult job before pandemic. And for people like us, there is an added thing to this. So it's just so important for people to hear your voice and hear your stories of resiliency, because just like the productivity illusion, this isn't going to be perfect. There's going to be trial and error. I think we even, and I wanted to sort of get one more quick look at some of the work. I think we got some edited work too. But as we sort of wind down, and these portraits, what are we looking at right now, Cristi?
So these are mostly commissioned portraits, some personal work as well. At the upper right-hand corner is a portrait of my mom. In the portrait in the center is a portrait of the author Amy Tan that I made in college, that I got to present to her, which was really lovely. Yeah, there's life paintings. Yeah, as you scroll down, they're all commissions that I've made in the past year and a half. And even with the commissions that people come to me with, they have a pretty specific idea. I still try to find ways to infuse my own, like I always try to make commissions something that's fun for me to draw, because I think that if I got some kind of joy out of creating it, that joy is going to be translated to the recipient. So yeah, commissions are actually some of my favorite things to work on, because I work very well with constraints. When I have all of the possibilities in the world open to me, I seem to be paralyzed by just the options. So, yeah.
Oh, that's a great it's another great tie. So, Cristi, thank you so much for sharing your works and inspirations. We'll make sure that your links are available, just like we'll be making sure YWCA's links and resources are available. We're going to be moving over into our next guests, but again, Cristi, thank you so much. Please stay with us. If you have, we'll hopefully be having a chance to talk towards the end of the series again.
Awesome.
So, with this great group of guests, we've really been talking about productivity, functioning, adjustments, and a lot of the intersections sort of link up together. And our next guests are from a tremendous organization called the Boston Bulldogs of Chicago. We have Juliette and Michael, and I want to make sure we can hear and see them first. We've got some video coming up here, Juliette Goldstein and Michael Ray. Let's make sure we can hear them and see them. Juliette and Michael.
Here they come.
I wonder if this can we do a duel? No, okay. So, Juliette and Michael, thanks for joining us. How are you all doing?
Good, how are you?
Doing good, Carl.
Fantastic. Thank you both for joining us. So I would really love the opportunity to have Juliette, if you could explain or talk about what is the Boston Bulldogs before we go forward.
Sure. The Boston Bulldogs is a running group that is for addicts in recovery, anyone impacted by addiction, clinical practitioners, or anyone that just kind of cares about the community at large. And prior to self-distancing, we were meeting every Tuesday evening at 6:30 for group runs, where we would come out, share stories, talk about ourselves, learn about running, learn about fitness, but overall just kind of form a nice bond with no judgment. You know, you were accepted for who you were that day when you showed up. So you could walk, run, whatever. Since social distancing has been put in place, we haven't been able to meet in person, but as Michael will talk about later, we've had some other opportunities to stay connected during this time and to work on our fitness and our wellness as well.
Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, before we talk about alternatives, so Boston Bulldogs is it a clinical level type of group, or you know how?
No. Clinicians are invited if they want to come and run. Anyone can show up to run. You don't have to have any running experience. You can walk. We have several walkers that come every week, but anyone can show up. That basically just wants to be supportive of the individuals that are there on a weekly basis.
That's awesome. And Michael, what have been some of the adjustments that had been made in, with self-distancing?
Sure. So the Bulldogs were very quick to shift into virtual mode. So almost immediately, our full circle leader, Megan in Boston, immediately created weekly Zoom meetings for everybody. So, we have a Bulldogs Facebook page and for Zoom links. So each week, every Tuesday, we have a huge Zoom meeting. So that keeps all of us in all areas between Boston and Chicago connected. And then The creator of the Boston Bulldogs, Coach Mike Ferrullo, he does morning meditation Zoom meetings on Monday mornings and Thursday mornings. So throughout the week, there's multiple times for the Bulldogs to connect, to talk about sobriety, to talk about life, what's going on. Because we are such a social group and we all love running, that's keeping us connected. The shift is made very quickly, and it has definitely helped everybody altogether.
Thank you for sharing. And so one of the things why we wanted to sort of bring this on is because this is definitely a story of adjustment in current realities. And we were really fascinated by the Boston Bulldog story, the inspiration. I know you talked about it a little bit, but for folks who, are tuning in, obviously, we're based out of Chicago, but we talk about things all over the place. But your running group meets in Chicago. And just sort of going back to that idea of wanting to continue to call it Boston Bulldogs, what was the sort of inspiration for keeping that in place?
So the Boston Bulldogs had some press in Runner's World and at some national levels, and we really try to run the model as closely as we can to the way it performs in Boston, and it just had more name recognition. So you can see we wear shirts that say "Running with the Bulldogs," but it was more for name recognition. And a lot of people know the Boston Bulldogs as anyone who shows up. Our motto is just show up and come out and be with us. So that was why we kept the name Boston Bulldogs, and it also didn't require redoing the website. So.
Well, that's perfect. And I think we even have the video running, so that might pop up as we're talking here. But so, Juliette and Michael, one of the things that we found in talking about when we first were setting up the live recording, we were going to just talk about the connection between physical activity and our mental health. And I think that that's a natural thing to talk about here, even with the current realities. Keeping the connectedness going. Could you sort of talk about what you've noticed or what you found as a value with the community? Like, do you feel like that sort of the Bulldog community is still going strong even without the physical the physical in-person connection?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think it's getting a little more difficult. I think most of what we're doing is through social media, which I think people can argue can have very positive benefits, but can also have very negative consequences as well. So, just trying to figure out where am I going to go for a run where I can social distance and not make anyone else feel uncomfortable. And then, perhaps when I'm on the run, I'm going to FaceTime a Bulldog and we're going to pretend that we're running next to each other, or just kind of things that are a little more outside of the box or more creative than I thought I would ever have to be in coaching running. Or inside, doing some intervals to get that heart rate up so that if I'm having a bad day, I can just, and talking to someone about that or texting what my workout was and, in a nice ribbing fashion. What'd you do? Show me your profile or your Strava or whatever. And again, just trying to engage with other runners that are outside, from a safe distance, waving, saying hello, trying to just, understand that the lakefront's not there anymore, but we have other ways that we can connect and talk to people. And they may not be the people we saw every week, but it's just another way to get those connections in place. And someone just, hey, how you doing? I'm good today. How are you? Oh, I'm good. So, and Michael actually has been with family for the time being. So I'll let him talk to that a little bit because he's actually not in Chicago right now. So.
Please share with us, Michael.
Yeah, so aside from the Bulldog stuff going on, I was laid off, and coincidentally enough, things just kind of worked out with my girlfriend and I, and we flew to Florida. Literally, we got laid off and flew down here, and I took this time to go see my mom And I'm an addict. I've been sober a little over 6 years now. And just being in my mom's house is a big deal. And being able to be a man and to have my mom trust me and to allow me in her doors and let me sleep here, feed me, give me the opportunity to help her and to trust me has been huge. So the different things that I'm learning and the different things that I'm able to apply through my sobriety and the things that I've learned through the Bulldogs and through my friends have helped me adjust very quickly. So I've been lucky enough to just be here for my mom and for my sisters in a way that I've never been able to be before because I've always been addicted to drugs. So in my sobriety, this has given me the opportunity to use the toolbox that I have in my sobriety and be relied upon to be dependable. And you know, I have a girlfriend, and I'm sure many other people are in the same situation where now you are, you know, you're confined with your significant other, and it's taught me a lot about myself. We've been able to go on runs. Thankfully, we've been in sunny Southwest Florida, so it's been a great time taking her on runs. Everybody down here is so nice, and you're waving hello, and so just the kindness that is currently flowing, and seeing new runners. I mean, how many times have you looked out your window and seen people you've never seen before running? You know, so my thought process on that is welcome to the sport that I love. And I have a huge feeling that when we come out of this on the other side positive, we are going to see so many more people actively engaged in the community because now I feel like now they kind of see that it's like have to be stuck inside, so they've got a taste of the outside. They've gotten that heart rate up. They've gotten those feet moving, and they're seeing what we experience when we run and the change that occurs in you and that amazing feeling. Even if you walked fast a block, it doesn't matter. You got out and not moving, and that's the goal. Is just doing something positive for yourself. So it's been a great experience so far. I don't have anything negative to say.
Thank you so much for sharing that, you know, sort of lived experience, right? It's a really heavy thing sometimes for people to talk about where they've been, where they're struggling. You know, Cristi was brave enough to share with us, you know, her sort of experiences. And thank you so much for sharing about, you know, your sobriety and what you found out of this. And that's kind of what we talk about with like turning a negative into a positive here. That I think you brought up something that also touches on a very big topic that's not really being talked about right now. Um, in this isolation period, we might have heard it through sort of cynical side comments, but when they talked about essential businesses that stay open, and they talk about things like liquor stores need to stay open, and people would make jokes about like, well, that's so people don't go through withdrawals or things like that. Um, this time can be very hard for maybe people who are being struggling with addictions, but also can be just as exceptionally hard for folks who have found a path to recovery and have found a place out of these challenges where, you know, they may be in a physical domestic space that revisits or can be re-traumatizing or things like that. And I just think it's so phenomenal that you are able to sort of share your story and what's been successful for you, because you have experienced a piece of you know, this was an adverse environment potentially, you know, and it takes a lot of strength to be able to engage and move forward on that. And I think that that's really important for people to hear.
I mean, just real quick, you know, I really appreciate the openness and the honesty. You know, I suffer from some OCD, definitely anxiety, you know, the different things that go on with our mental health. The more we keep them in the dark, the more they stay in the dark, and the more there's no progress in helping and people, you know, not thinking that it's a big deal. It's a big deal to us because we have to live with that. So I've definitely based my sobriety, and I like to surround myself with people like Cristi that are open and honest about what they're going through, because that way people know it's happening and people can help us. people are now aware and can kind of keep an eye on us like our friends do. So if we disappear or we're self-isolating, we like to do, somebody will reach out. So the more we talk about it, like Hope for the Day and suicide prevention, things change and things move forward the more we talk about it and the more we're open about it.
Brother, truth right there. And that's something that, you know, as you're watching and listening, whether it's tonight or in the future context, I really want you to sort of underline that in your mind is, you know, there's no magic wand for mental health, and mental health is both clinical diagnosis, it's both dealing with substance abuses and addictions. There's no magic wand. It's not one conversation, one magic pill, one therapy session, or anything. It is a process, and it's something that it takes work and discipline. And you brought up another excellent point that should be underscored here, is that support from other people helps empower you. And I think something that I'm observing both from the great recommendations that Kelin has provided and listening to Cristi sort of share her story, and now you both talking, especially from the Boston Bulldogs side, and then Michael, you know, driving in very specifically from your experience, is that this is an opportunity to really find a value in connection with other people, and it not just be, sometimes when we say find connection, people can think that that's a sort of soft hippy dippy thing and it's just whatever, but like these are very, very powerful tools that really do give us strength. And I think there's a lot of people who are learning of the power and importance of connection. And I always think of, whenever I hear the word connection, I always think of this quote from the Wonder Bus family, who I hope they might be watching right now. That they said this quote that was, connection is the currency of wellness. And listening to your story, Michael, I think that really underscores that, how people can be supportive to one another, whether it's physically or just, you know, in the sense of through video connection, or even the folks who are waving at you as you're running. That's a powerful connection. And I think I'm almost positive that hopefully one of the most best things about what will happen after this current reality is that people will not undervalue or think less of the power of maybe just being at a live concert, you know, or at a live sporting event and just cheering at the same time. Or I found myself, this is so silly, but like one of my big physical connections is pro wrestling. And right now, a lot of pro wrestling is like doing empty arenas, if they're even doing anything. A lot of the industry, the independent industry, is hit hard. That's not the point right now. But I was going to bring it up. I was watching a thing where there was a live crowd, and I got like emotional because there's only a couple. It was watching something from like only a few weeks ago, and I was like, and I just, the thought of like going to the Metro or having a run meetup right now is probably, you know, I think people are going to be it's going to be a very powerful thing. But I cannot thank you enough, Juliette and Michael, for sort of talking to us about this. And again, we're going to make Boston Bulldogs Chicago and Boston Bulldogs of Boston, the whole organization, we're going to make sure that those resources are available as we republish this video, because we want people to find different opportunities and resources to connect. And I can't thank you two enough for coming on. I think we've got a little fun activity we're going to try and do at the end of this episode. And we're going to have our last guest come on, but if you two have time, please stick around.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So our last guest tonight is going to be introducing, well, it's a DIY project, but it's also kind of a movement in a way, if you think about it. This is Megan Murphy is going to be coming on, and I want to make sure you heard it correctly. That's Megan, not Megan, but Megan Murphy, talking about the Kindness Rocks project. Let me make sure we can hear and see Megan. Can we hear you? Can we see you?
Hi there.
Hi, Megan. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Well, it is a real treat to have you on. And please, could you, some video might come over the screen as you're talking, but could you please introduce yourself and tell us about the Kindness Rocks project?
Sure. So my name is Megan Murphy, and I am founder of a grassroots international kindness project called the Kindness Rocks Project. And I live on Cape Cod in Massachusetts. And really, this is the project of many. Right now, we're in over 65 countries and growing. And basically, the idea behind this grassroots movement is to create kind messages on rocks and leave them in communities for others to find. We like to call it the art of connecting.
Perfect. And as people can see the video going, they're seeing a sort of craft work where you might be using a sort of, that's a clay type substance, right?
Yeah, so this is, during these uncertain times, many people that maybe live in cities, I saw some of your prior guests live in the city, you may not be able to go out and find rocks. And so through some simple online purchasing, you can get some soap molds made of silicone and some cemental, and you can actually make your own rocks, or in this case, kindness coins. The video that you're watching right now is how to do this from home. It's super easy. And as you can see right now, these are tokens that I personally made for healthcare workers as just a little thank you, because I cannot sew a mask or anything, or hole in pants. But I can certainly create and paint kindness rocks. And these are just little tokens of thanks, and they will be going to local healthcare workers here on Cape Cod.
So that is so phenomenal. I wanted to acknowledge that another version of this is, if you think about like rocks that you can sort of write on, you can do this in a sanitary way. You can go outside and grab some rocks and wipe them down and put messaging on them and leave them places. And people may be like, well, do I feel safe picking up a random rock? And that's a perfectly realistic comment, but sometimes just leaving a positive affirmation out that someone looks at and they keep moving on with their day is an option. And why we wanted to have you on as a guest, as a sort of tie-in, is that connection in this time can be tricky. And if you think about whether you're running out in the field or going for a walk or taking your dogs out or doing something like that, or maybe you're looking for a creative endeavor or an opportunity to bring your domestic space, whether it's an apartment or a home or what have you, together, we thought that the Kindness Rocks thing was something that had two very key features. It's low maintenance. We're not asking you to go buy a bunch of things and spend a lot of money that may not be realistic for a lot of folks. It's accessible. And really, it's a chance to sort of express yourself, to maybe put a message that you would like to see. And it's a real paid forward thing. You can leave them in a targeted place like a healthcare facility, and just, put it on somewhere, or it can be somewhere in the general public on a street corner. But it has a lot of mobility, and that's really kind of something we wanted to present to our audience. This project was introduced to us through one of our incredible agents of impact, Nancy Bartos, who took this project all the way to Africa and the Middle East and through South Asia with her. And we just thought that what you're doing is building a sense of connectivity that doesn't require us to be best friends, right? It can be person to person, but it can be displaced because one person making that rock or that graphic on something and putting it somewhere, 20, 30, a dozen people could check it out. And that positive affirmation, that little bit of messaging can really positively impact someone. And I was wondering, what's been sort of one of your favorite, or a few of your favorite sort of memories or experiences with this project as you got it started?
So first of all, Nancy Bartos is just an amazing, amazing human being whom I had the honor to meet through social media. we can build connections with people that we never meet in person and have a relationship through social media, which is what Nancy and I have done when she was traveling for your organization and she was doing all this work in these countries such as Africa, and she was painting rocks with the kids. It just, every time she sent me a video, my heart just was just overflowing with gratitude for the work that she was doing. And for me to see, something that I started as a personal hobby during a difficult time in my own life, take off and spread through people like Nancy, just has been, it's just so overwhelming. Amazing, actually. And again, it is the art of connecting, and you do not need any fancy supplies. You can certainly just grab some rocks that are in your yard and some paint. And the beauty about this project is, Carl, that it's a combination of art therapy and kindness. And I had no idea personally that that is a really powerful thing, but I now realize this. So what happened was, when I was walking the beaches and looking for inspiration and guidance, I looked around at everybody else and I saw that many people looked the same as me. Like maybe they were seeking something, or maybe they looked fearful. And so when I started writing messages on rocks and leaving them on the beach, I was writing messages that I needed myself. And when you give to others that which you need yourself, that's when the healing takes place. And so that's really the power behind what this project is all about. And I'm just thrilled that people are joining and that it's helping during these difficult times.
That's great. That's very important for people to hear, because, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think that it's really, really important that you brought up this point of like, what would be messages you wanted to hear? This kind of brings us back to this idea about like the dignity of the individual, and that probably one of the hardest things for us to do is to listen to what do we need personally. We get commercials and a lot of digital input about telling us what we should want and what we should need, but it's probably really hard to like find stillness in a moment and actually check in with our inner, our internal self and say like, what nourishes me? What do I really need? And I think that we can find strength from that. So it's just so important that this project, in a lot of ways, can look like, yeah, this is really simple. This can be an individual project. It can be a family unit project, but it also becomes an opportunity to check in with yourself. This is full circle of sort of things Kelin was talking about at the top of the show, and what we've heard from Cristi and sort of Michael and Juliette talking about this. This can be a chance to listen to yourself and, finding a message that means something to you. Think about how amazing that is if that message that is powerful and useful to you as a tool also connects for someone else, that they needed to hear something like that. So that's just a great idea and a great insight, Megan. And as we wind down, we're going to be showcasing the Kindness Rocks project, and it's going to be something that, at hope of the day, we may even start like a group kindness project. We don't have an official thing yet, but aside from the great work Nancy's done, but I think just for people who are actively listening right now and engaging with us, it would be really cool if you took on your own Kindness Rocks project. And let me tell you something. We know that rocks is a way to do this, but maybe people take a piece of parchment paper. We saw there's a student, we weren't able to get their content in, but there was a high school age student who became familiar with your project. And what they did is they took like little note cards and they put positive affirmations and went down to they live in a rural area. And so they went to an acute care center. They didn't have like a major hospital near them. So they went to like a 24-hour acute care center because that was the only medical resource in their area. And they put them on like the car windows, and they didn't know whether they were leaving them for nurses or for attendees there. And I just think that, that's just powerful stuff. Just, doing something that isn't asking for more attention than just sort of trying to put positivity out into the world is a beautiful thing. So again, Megan, thank you so much for coming on. the work, this movement that you started, we at Hope for the Day for sure want to, definitely back it in, in spirit. And as we wind down, today, I thought it would be pretty cool. We have everyone still online with us here. And I kind of want to see if everyone wants to play along. I kind of have sort of two questions I'd like to sort of close out, leave to the group. Number one, I would sort of ask to our guests tonight, if you were to put a message, what would be your Kindness Rocks message? There's lots of messages, but I would kind of say, what would be a Kindness Rocks message either you would leave for someone or maybe you'd like to read? Megan, could I put you on the spot and ask if you would want to answer that?
Well, actually, it's funny when you just said that. I was like, well, I actually have a rock with a question just sitting here waiting. So this rock says, if you were in charge of the whole world, what would you do to make the world a happier place?
All right. Well, let's just make the audible. Let's feels comfortable answering that question.
Juliette.
To Juliette.
Juliette, take a go. Let's unmute you. Make sure you're unmuted. There you go.
There we go.
Okay. I think I'd smile more at people that I see that I don't know. Sometimes in the city, you just walk with your head down and do whatever. I think I'd smile more and say hi.
I love it. Great answer, Juliette. Anyone else want to take a go at it? Going once, going twice.
I'll answer.
Let's see.
I would say that one of the most powerful things that we can do to let people know that they matter is simply hold the space for them and listen. There's so much power in giving people of your time and of your attention. So I would do a lot more of that.
See, now this is a pen that's also a drumstick, but just imagine it's a microphone and this is like, so maybe. And I think that's great. And, if something doesn't come to your mind right now, feel free to share in the chat thread and our guests, if you want to think about it more, maybe we can leave something on afterwards. But I also want to maybe piggyback off of that with one question I will ask everyone if they, Kelin, do you have an answer?
I don't have to say it now, but I just think like saying to everyone, like, it's okay to need each other and it's okay to ask for help, and that we all like need each other and need support and help right now. Because I think like the patterns of our lives have us interfacing with people and have us connecting with people. But right now, folks need to be like a little more intentional about it. And I think like when we're not seeing each other in person on like a psychic level, it can start to feel like nobody's there. And so having like consistency with connection can be really helpful for folks. Like, saying to a friend, like, yo, I got to talk to you every week. Like, can we make that happen? Is that going to work for us? Right. So yeah, I guess my rock would say like, we all need each other.
Oh, did you get, is that a prop you in there too?
Oh, I'm holding a rock.
Oh, that was not planned. This is great.
She started talking. I was like, oh, it'd be nice to hold a rock right now. I have one.
Is there anyone else who wanted to sort of jump in on that question? Because if not, I kind of have, it's a little bit of the same question, but it's maybe a little more personally introspective, to the same level. So I don't want to cheat on there. But it's something I've asked before,
Let me have my rock.
Oh, Mike wants to jump in. This is Magic Mike. He's the one who's doing things like that.
I want to do a rock. Kindness Rocks project. I'm a big fan. I think I would put on my rock, we are going to be okay. Just like that downward range, looking forward to, even though that we don't know the end point, knowing that this is temporary, and like controlling how we react to, each little day, one day at a time.
Love that.
Thank you for sharing that, Mike. I'm glad you
All
jumped.
right, I'm out.
He'll come back. And yeah, I think the way I would want to close this out is something I've been talking about is we don't know how long, isolation is going to be. We don't know how long a lot of these realities are going to be. And this is temporary, but we also know that everything has changed. And I constantly like to talk about the fact that we're kind of all in a Star Trek moment. We're all pioneers in a new endeavor because people can talk about the Spanish flu of 1917 or whatever, but this is all new. Okay. What we're going through is new for everybody. It doesn't matter whether you're 90 or 12 years old. And if you think about the last couple of years, we spent a lot of time trying to othering each other, whether it's ethnically, socially, economically, or even just generationally, Z's and millennials and boomers and all that kind of stuff. And now all of a sudden, like the world's come and slapped all of us in the face and say, you all in this bucket together. And here's what I'd like to sort of prompt to all of you is just whatever is going to happen in the future, there will become a new normal. And I'd prompt to you, what would be one thing that you would like to either leave behind in the old or take with you into the new normal? So is there something you'd want to leave? Or maybe something you'd want to bring with you that you're learning about? And we've kind of talked about that a little bit with the Kindness Rocks and that sort of questions, but that's kind of how I want to close out. So let's start with Kelin.
Oh, on the spot. I think in not being able to connect in person with all the people that I want to, it just highlights the ways in which in the past, like when I had that privilege, it was easy for me to get caught up in if there was a disagreement or if somebody was critical of me, right, that could outweigh all the positive stuff that was around. And like, I feel like now it's like, no, you don't have time for the haters. Like you're like there's so much love out there. Right. And I think like, just like being in gratitude for the connection that I do have rather than worrying about what people think who, I might not be their cup of tea, right? That's okay, right? There's enough connection out there. So to just like keep it moving and appreciate what is. Yeah.
Thank you, Kelin. Cristi?
Well, I have on my phone like a list of mantras that I like to just carry around, especially when it comes to combating intrusive thoughts. So like in OCD recovery, instead of engaging in a compulsion, you have to like obviously not do that and divert your attention another way. So I'm big on mantras. And I think that one that I want to take with me and really, ingrain in my brain is that acceptance is a practice of uncertainty. And that resonates with me so deeply because I have a brain that demands like black and white, like I need certainty. And I feel that I'm constantly trying to reprogram that. But I feel like we're all in a state right now where even the most anxious people who come up with all kinds of disaster scenarios probably couldn't have anticipated this. So just this idea that we have no idea what's going to happen. And we've seen how quickly our world can change in the course of a month, a week. And just remembering that in order to accept, in order to find peace, you don't have to know. So just like learning to be comfortable with the ambiguity and the uncertainty, I think is something that's going to serve all of us.
Thank you, Cristi. Next up, let's go to Michael.
So in thinking about that question, for me personally, I want to bring in this new world that we're in, just another level for me of just chilling out and just calmness. I can go 0 to 100 real quick, and I like to catastrophize and listening. So I think just for me personally, I want to bring in a practicing ability of just sit still, just be calm, think it through, and then act. I don't want to act first and ask questions later. I want just chill, quiet for a second, figure it out.
Thank you, Michael. Juliette?
Well, I think for me, so with the Bulldogs, one of our sayings prior to our current state was, through isolation we suffer, through connection we heal. And I think a lot of people are suffering right now in isolation, whether it be through mental illness, through physical illness, through just being lonely. But what I want to take into the future is the new ways I've found to be connected to people right now. It may not be where I'm talking to you on a screen face to face, but I'm, seeing you outside the window or sharing a similar experience at the same time, on the phone or whatever, but taking those ways to look at connection differently into the future, so that when I have a day where it's like, oh, I haven't seen anyone or this or that, oh wait, I can do this, and that's going to bring me closer to other people, and they don't have to be physically near me. So that's what I'd like to take to the future.
Thank you, Juliette. And Megan?
So this is so interesting. With the project, I always say that the perfect rock finds the perfect person. And I only had 2 rocks on my desk. And the first one was the perfect question for everybody. And the other rock is the answer to this question. Tell me that's not crazy. So this is my answer. It's let it be. And so I would say that, trying not to control that which I cannot control, and to adapt, and to be very mindful about how I view whatever it is that's going on, and trying to adjust my temperament so that I can try and put a positive spin and go from problem to solution mode. And then once I figure it out myself, share that knowledge and help others. So.
Thank you so much, Megan. That's great. Michael, you got one soundbite in there?
Me?
Yeah.
Want me to add?
Yeah, one last thing.
Well, I think I'm going to continue to try and be smart about how I use social media, and like constantly bombarding myself with information, and be more deliberate, and like always check in with myself. Like when it's starting to make me freak out and get frustrated or wind myself up, like when I check in on a news update and then I'm just like, I get so frustrated that I got to check right back out. So being able to do that going forward too, and then returning to social media or technology like that with a deliberate sense of purpose. Like, I'm going to get on this to stay connected with this person or these people. I'm going to get on here to look at this thing that makes me smile, or this thing that helps me learn something new. I think that's what I hope to make my new normal.
Thank you, Mike. So that's going to wrap up our episode of Conversations Cafe this week. And in closing, I want to have our listeners really pay attention to our phenomenal guests. We talked across a number of different intersections, but we found similar topics and concepts in communications and connections with one another, and listening to ourselves, and really having an honest conversation internally. And the way I would answer the question about sort of bringing up what we'd want to have in the new normal actually comes in a word. And the word I'd want to bring into our new sense of things connects with everyone that we've had as a guest, and that is the word ritual. You might hear the word ritual and think of a religious or spiritual demonstration or act, but rituals are just disciplines and behaviors and things that we make normalized functions in our day-to-day experience. And ritual can be the things that keep us stable and sober. Ritual can be the things that make us feel connected. Ritual can be the things that make us keep our minds healthy. Um, but ultimately, especially in the current realities, ritual is a practice which gives us a sense of control, particularly in times when there are things that we can't control. And to a great extent, life is not something that we really control, more or less. And finding tools that give you a sense of balance, a sense of forward, downward vision, positive inspiration, you can make a ritual out of those things. You can invest in energy and time, even if it's setting a time every week to call and check in with your friends or family members. That can be part of the ritual to innovate or nourish yourself. And that's kind of where I want you to sort of, if you're listening right now or in the future days, weeks, and beyond, that's what I'd really like you to pay attention to, is how all of our guests talked about the tools that they found useful, either by profession for others to take advantage of, or to sustain themselves or to be supportive to others. These are all opportunities that you have the power to take on. The world's uncertain right now, but the world's always been uncertain. And even though we face a very daunting negativity, we can meet that and confront it with a sense of resilience. We don't have to ignore reality or tell ourselves falsehoods in order to also face things with a positive mindset. So, Conversations Cafe is something that's brought to all of you with the kind support of Jensen, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, AFSP, Johnson and Johnson, and the great work of our supporting groups like Mike Vinopal, Rick Osowski at Anthologies of Hope, Homie Vicky, another team member at Hope for the Day. And we're so proud to bring this conversation into your community space. We'll be back next week at the same time, Thursday, April 23rd at 6 p.m. Stay tuned for other Hope for the Day programming through the week. We have Saturday morning tunes on Sip of Hope Coffee Bar's Instagram Live. That'll be this Saturday. We also have education available if you check on Hope for the Day's website and events page, or go to purevention.org. Also this Sunday, we have Hope for the Day founder and CEO Johnny Boucher doing another one of his coffee talks at 10 a.m. on Hope for the Day's Instagram Live. Sunday's guest will be Craig Owens. We want you to check all this stuff out as ways to stay connected and be involved in the community. And lastly, well, we're talking about a lot of solutions and opportunities for people to take care of their own mental health and connect with others. The fact is that when we say we are in this together, we all share in being impacted by this global reality, but we're not all experiencing it in the same way. There's economic realities, there's social realities. We may not have a warm and safe domestic space to be isolated in. And because of that, we want to make sure you understand that there are resources available for you to meet adverse realities around you, even if it's clinical supports. So if you go to hftd.org and you click on the Find Help, you will go to a section that has a resource compass. And I want to bring this up as our last note for the night, because the resource compass at Hope for the Day, both when you type in your zip code, it doesn't just bring you to direct mental health services, it also brings you to social services, because what can impact your mental health can also be job loss or access to affordable food and housing. So when you use the resource compass at hftd.org, that's hftd.org, you will get results for services that's both direct mental health services, but also social services like finding supports for access to food, finding unemployment benefits, and other types of services, and shelters and other housing options, along with a number of other things. Because our mental health is more than just a clinical diagnosis. Lots of things can impact us, and it's important that you understand it's okay not to be okay, and there's hope and resources a lot closer than you may think. That's our show tonight. I want to thank all of our guests who have been phenomenal. You're all wonderful human beings, and for you watching and listening at home, thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next week. So we're going to be taking it off the air with a cool little takeoff video, but good night, everybody. And thank you to our guests.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And
mental health is very serious, and it can get very serious, and it can be very scary, and people don't want to talk about that.
For them, it's often bullshit, or it's just in my head.
They were afraid of it. When people think mental health, they automatically think like straitjacket, padded room.
I didn't have a proper outlet or a proper voice for a lot of things that I was feeling inside.
I've always had trouble with anxiety, depression.
In my last year of middle school was my first suicide attempt.
I was at a dark point in my life as well, but I managed to overcome with the help of friends, of course, and then also talking and sharing. Asking for help saved my life.
If you're really lost and you don't know what to do, you can build on that and you can learn.
When I started talking about what I felt, it became a huge relief because they were incredibly understanding.
Talk about things, just talk.
You can make it acceptable to not be okay.
It's okay not to be okay.
It is okay when you need okay to feel it.
Ce n'est pas mal de ne pas se sentir bien.
It's okay not to be okay, it really is.